Uh, if anybody is new here, and we always usually have somebody just pops in out of the blue beautifully, and so they're wondering, well, what are we doing here? Well, we go word into silence into word. That's the easiest way to see the structure of this thing. We start out with some kind of spoken meditation. And again, that's sort of Department of Redundancy department, because meditation classically seen in both classical spirituality of Christianity and also, interestingly, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, meditation means to employ words or symbols or any kind of device you can to evoke a deeper state of being. But it uses words or the equivalent of words, pictures, icons, whatever, icon gazing, classic form of meditation, and it's always meant to take you deeper, deeper. The contemplation is different, as we'll explore today. Contemplation is, in essence, laying aside of words and thought for a while, and we'll explore what that is and why that. We're always exploring that, and that's our middle section, where when this talk ends, we'll get a chance to go into the silence. The picture today on our screensaver was a desert cactus, because it is contemplation is a kind of symbolic desert. And today we're celebrating the start of a kind of a desert time, at least as far as Christianity is concerned. So, and then after that 20 minutes in our kind of contemplative desert, we will merge and we'll go into a kind of community meeting format that's close to what the Quakers would do with their meeting, where it's a kind of hybrid, lots of silence, people in contemplation, but then if something resonated with you, either during the talk or during the period of sitting, the heart is how we journey through all this, and the heart resonates with things. If it resonates with you and it feels like a gift that would be good to give to the community, you can unmute at that point and give it to the group. It's a very rich period. But so so it's word into silence, and then into a kind of integral word in silence stance that we do at the very end. So here's the meditation for today. And it just came up this morning. I had another thing prepared, but it just bloomed like the desert cactus. So this is what we'll do today. It's called Desert Spring. We are entering the sacred time that some call Lent. As a young boy, I thought the word was Lent, like the gray stuff Mom took out of the dryer. During my childhood, Lent always had a dull gray overtone to it. So I was really surprised when I found out decades later that Lent came from the Old English word for springtime. That was a real surprise. Lent means springtime. It's, located just as, out here, loosely follow the little plants are starting to spring up. So it's located that way. Year after year, Lent shows up again and again, and that's the beauty of the circular nature of what Christians call the liturgical year. It keeps going around and around. It's like this. I love this image of the spiral that I wear, because the spiral not only goes around and around, but it's a bit like a corkscrew. It'll take you deeper. So sacred symbols return again and again over time, so we have a chance to resonate them. to resonate with them at a deeper level. It means something else to me now than what it meant when I thought it was Lent. You know, springtime begins with Jesus going into the desert to face the childhood operating systems that every human needs to face and outgrow on the way to becoming fully human and fully divine. The instinctual operating system that was meant to help us all survive as children, the desire for security, esteem, and control, must be faced and dismantled. And that's why Jesus went into the desert for 40 days. That's the symbolic meaning of that. That's why today's reading is just that reading. Jesus has this wow experience. It's in the Jordan River, which is far distant, whereas with John the Baptist, it's in the wilderness, which nobody thought was sacred. Sacred was the temple in Jerusalem, the center of sacredness. He goes into this river, which is probably more like a stream, and has this epiphanal moment where, that he'd been waiting for his whole life, 30 some years probably, where he hears, his heart resonates with this deeper voice that says, "Hey, you're my son and I love you." Well, if that wasn't big enough, then it says in Luke, which is today's reading, it says the Holy Spirit moved him farther out into the desert to spend some time there. 40 days. Okay, 40 days. So he's moving even farther from the Orthodox center of where anything good could be found, the temple. And he's out there. 40 days is a biblically symbolic number that really means as long as it takes. Moses, 40 years in the desert, 40 this, 40 that. It's a symbolic word that means as long as it takes. It could take you years. It could take you your whole life. As the life expectancy during the time of Jesus, if you were lucky, was about 40 years. So this is symbolic. Somebody once asked Pema Chodron, how long does it take to finish this journey? And she wisely said, it's going to take your whole life. So we can stop being impatient about this. We can just buckle up for the journey. So how did Jesus do it? Contemplation. And again, I want to stress just a kind of specific thing to just help us be a little clearer. Contemplation, the way of praying beyond words and thought. The way of praying beyond words and thought. Most of us think of prayer as, I lay me down to sleep, or Our Father art in heaven. They're all good, but Jesus wasn't doing that. He was going beyond words and thought. The desert doesn't have much in it, you see. Very silent, very empty. So it's all symbolic. Contemplation is a way to explain what Jesus was doing in the desert. Contemplation is not a way of learning as much as it's a way of unlearning. Get that? Because most people come to spiritual practice thinking they're going to get something. Well, this is a way of ungetting. It stands out in my mind of 30 years of teaching in a classroom. My favorite moment is a little 7th grade girl came up to me on the 175th day of school. We had all the books packed. We were just waiting for the bell to ring. And she said, "Mr. Z, I got to tell you, you're the worst teacher I ever met." And I was like, I was a little taken aback. And then she says, "But you're the greatest unteacher that I ever met. You untaught me so many things." And I softened up a little bit when I heard that. I got what she said. She's really a sharp little girl. I haven't forgotten her name, but I don't forget that encounter. So contemplation is a way of unlearning. And really, Jesus shows us how to unlearn and dismantle our childhood emotional programs for happiness. I mean, uh, you're not going to be happy if you didn't have the security of the mother, and if you didn't have her affection and esteem, and if you didn't have a sense of a bit of control. That's what children need to survive. We all need it. We got it in various levels and degrees. Uh, but we learn to we learn to actually be addicted to that program. The problem is it only fails to deliver as we age. But in fact, and not only that, it acts as a barrier to our full development as human beings. So Jesus goes out to the desert to dismantle this, to see it, first of all, to face it, and then to dismantle it. In the silence of the desert, in this most radical form of dismantling the whole structure of the false self, what Merton called the false self, in the laying aside of thoughts, Jesus shows us the way to nourish the seeds of Desert Spring that will inevitably lead you to the resurrection of the true self. So just unpack this just a little bit. At least in the Christian tradition, which is part of its brilliance, the same stories come along, because the same symbols come along. I'm 72 years into this particular journey, and I was probably aware of what was going on when I was 6 or 7 when I got into school. We got ready for Lent, and all that kind of stuff. So probably 65 years, this keeps coming around. This keeps coming around. And how you see is what you see. And when you have the eyes of a little 6-year-old who's, getting, Baltimore Catechism drilled into his head, it looks a little different than what it looks like now and what it looked like all along, you see. And so now, as it looks to me, it's like in the Native American thing, what Jesus was doing was like a form of vision quest. You go into the desert to face something. Buddha went into the wilderness too. He went into the jungle from the palace, you see, to face the essential programming, you see. Because it wasn't delivering even for the Buddha, and the Buddha had everything. He was a prince. He had a couple of palaces, one for the summer, one for the rest of the year. He had all these people massaging him, and he was in pretty great shape, but he wasn't happy because this childhood operating system. We're going to really go into this in more detail next Saturday, because you've got to understand that. Those of you working with Linda Rance on the Enneagram, you're looking at that childhood operating system at the surface of it. The 6 point is security, 5, 6s, and 7s, those temperament that really fixated on security. The 8, 9s, and 1s at the top, power and control. And then the 2, 3s, and 4s, affection and esteem. We all are actually, that's a whole program that got us through childhood. The problem is, you're 72 and you're still expecting it to deliver. It's not meant for adults. And we have to see it. And the seeing of it starts to dismantle it. And it's a long process. But underneath that, any of you working with the Enneagram for any serious amount of time know that it's a bi-level kind of setup. We'll be looking at this bi-level setup in a totally different way next Saturday. But underneath the surface personality stuff that, where we're locked into this, I got to be, symbols of security, symbols of affection and esteem and prestige, symbols of power and control. If you really don't crack this thing open, you just march your army into Ukraine. This is a guy who's just has not even remotely understood this childhood operating system. And people suffer on a huge scale there, but in all of our lives, the people around us, we hurt the ones we love because they're they're collateral damage. They're near the explosions that go on when your desire and your need for security gets frustrated, kaboom. When your need for affection and esteem gets frustrated, kaboom. When your need for power and control, that's my, there are three types of heroin, and that's my favorite one, power and control. When that gets frustrated, kaboom. And anybody near me in the family, that's collateral damage, you see. And we'll look into that a little bit more. But that's why Jesus went out to face that. Buddha faced 5 temptations. Buddhists tease it out always a little bit more, but if you can handle these 3, that's all right. To actually see them, and then gradually, we're all in recovery in that sense. We're all addicted to these 3 things. I'm still addicted to these 3 things, but it's not as severe. And I know I'm addicted to it. That's the beginning of recovery, when hey, I can't control my desire for these things. I need some help. See, so this is all, the whole transformative thing is also a recovery program, because we're recovering. Human beings, we're recovering. So it's a very deep prospect. So what we can do, as we're gonna segue in a couple of minutes to what we can do, the ultimate, and that's why, if you're a classic 12-step person in whatever recovery program, when you work your way through some things. The first one is admit you're addicted. Okay, admit you've lost your shit and you can't maintain it. You're not happy at all. I don't care how much money you got. You're CEO and you hit the concrete. And then you go to AA or something, or was another 12-step program. But it's brilliant. It's the one American addition to spirituality, if you ask me, is this idea of these steps. And when the 11th step is, you need some help here. We're talking about the higher power, or the deeper power, or the real power, whatever you want to call it. But we need some help. I cannot do it. My ego cannot pull this trick off. You will not find any kind of happiness or any kind of satisfaction running that childhood program as an adult. Doesn't fit, you see. So how do we actually tap into this higher power? And so the step 11 says, hey, you figure out how to get closer to this through meditation and prayer and meditation. Okay, good idea. And then you could go on to the 12th step. Then you're going to help everybody. That's why it's arranged that way. When you see Thomas Keating or Richard Rohr, when they do the 12 steps, they say, work with the higher power at all the steps, because really you're not doing it on your own. But then really learn how to do this a little bit more. And so, Lent just means just get a little bit more serious about it. Put in a 40-day retreat on this stuff. That's what I see every Sunday as here. And then trying to give everybody a chance to do an intensive kind of little mini Lent on Saturdays, so where we actually take a deeper dive into it, both intellectually in terms of pulling some, using our brains real hard and really looking deeply, but then also getting 4 periods of contemplation. Now, simplify what you do when I hit the bell. I'll just give you a few words there, but really it's the time to, and this was a desert father, Evagrius Ponticus, desert father in a Christian tradition. He said, contemplative prayer is the laying aside of thoughts. You just lay thoughts aside. There's nothing more radical than that, because we are what we think when we're in the program. We have our thoughts about ourselves, our image. You're laying apart you're laying thoughts aside, and thoughts is a cover term for your ideas, your you know, your images of yourself, your images of the world, uh, insights, God speaking to you, all that kind of stuff can appear to happen while you do it. And in a really radical way of cracking this open is to just, no matter what it is, it might seem like the Virgin Mary is speaking to you, directly. It's fine. It's not good or bad. You just lay it aside for this time. Put it to the side, and you go back to just sitting in the silence. Now, after, I always have pen and paper by me when I do this. And after, well, when you come out and end the time of contemplation, formal contemplation, well, then if things are still resonating like crazy, well, then you write them. That's what Martin did. He sat in contemplation, he laid everything, he just laid it aside, laid it aside, laid it aside. But when he came out, if it was still resonating with him, then he wrote. And that's going from contemplation to meditation. They're both good. They're just different. Now he's using words. That's where his 60 books came from, you see. He sat and did this radical thing of just laying it all aside, not grabbing onto anything. Even the temptation is to grab onto some great image or picture, or for me, great line of poetry. Lay it aside. And if it's really from God or from the divine, it'll still be resonating with you when you get done with the 20 minutes or whatever you're investing. Trust me on that. Trust me on it. So really let everything go. Just lay it aside, lay it aside, lay it aside. And sometimes the whole 20 minutes it seems to be like that. And then sometimes just when you lay something aside, there is a period of openness. Tibetans call it the gap. A period of openness. It's nice. Space around. Just that's what dismantles the program, because a program, childhood program, runs on thought, the energy of thought. Okay, and it's the energy of thought that's motivated by fear. And so what we're doing in contemplation is we're laying that aside. It's like we're going outside and sitting in the sun. Just letting, doing kind of spiritual sunbathing, if you want to look at it that way. It's a nice way to look at it. You're just sitting in the sun. And then all of a sudden cloud comes over, some thought that's driven by fear. I don't know about your mind, but I'd say 75, 80% of my thoughts are absolute nonsense. They're not worth holding on to, but there it is, and maybe it's higher than that, but some days could be 100%, but it's just nonsense. Lay the nonsense aside, lay the stuff of the world aside for a while. Maybe it's not nonsense. Maybe it's important. It'll come back to you if it's important. Trust me on this. Okay. So we're going to shift mentally and maybe physically a little bit right into a kind of mode of contemplation. So I'm going to do that shift, and we'll end the recording and move into contemplation.